This particular project took me about 11 hours over the course of 3 weeks. I did 10 interviews with different people. I pre-screened hundreds of resumes. I made a list of things that I would do better next time. Welcome to Gentle Frog's Bookkeeping Lily Pad, your cozy corner of the podcasting world, where numbers tell a story and bookkeeping blossoms into an adventure. My name is Rachel Barnett, and I'm glad you're here. This podcast is for bookkeepers who enjoy authentic, unfiltered, and always encouraging friend to talk shop with. We will be discussing what it's like to own and operate a small bookkeeping business. So when I started the podcast, I started by talking about some bookkeeper pre-screening that I had done. Apparently, this is a thing that I like to do about once a year until I remember how exhausting it is. I did this recently. I did this for somebody in the early part of December. I made a bunch of notes in Notion about what I did and what I might do differently if I do it again. I thought maybe it would be helpful just to hear what it's like to pre-screen for a bookkeeper to work at a company. This was pre-screening for a private business, not a bookkeeping firm. This is a job that's going to be part-time, about 20 hours per week. I did end up interviewing about 10 applicants. I had 2 recommendations that I provided to the business owner. One of them was a really, really strong recommendation. And the second was a recommendation for somebody that I felt could grow into the role, but wasn't perfect for the role right now. Spoiler, the business owner did hire the one person that I gave a strong recommendation for. So I'm happy for that. There isn't a job. If you're listening to this and you're wondering if you can reach out, the answer is no. But if you're listening to this and just wondering what it might be like to hire a person to work at your business, whether your business is a bookkeeping firm or otherwise, then I thought maybe I could just run through some of this stuff and maybe it would give you food for thought. So the first section I have is a recap of what I did for the business owner. First thing I did is identify what the client's needs were in terms of bookkeeping skills. Providing bookkeeping services for a business means that you need to know a particular set of skills. It's whatever the business needs. Not every business is going to use bills and bill payments or invoices and receive payments. In this case, they were doing bills and invoices and they wanted to get into purchase orders, but they weren't trying to do stuff like job costing. So I needed to figure out what the business was doing for their bookkeeping so that I could identify bookkeepers who either knew how to do those things or who could quickly learn those things. The business owner had a job posting set up on Indeed. I went through the job posting and cleaned it up. Imagine that somebody else trying to hire for that industry and they've picked out some keywords that they've heard, but it wasn't quite clear what the person was trying to do. That was what was happening here. The job post had some accounting words, but it wasn't saying what the job was about, and it wasn't saying what the candidate needed to know or have for experience. I came up with some pre-screening questions. It's incredibly important to do some sort of pre-screening because places like Indeed and ZipRecruiter and LinkedIn, they'll often have some sort of one-click apply, and you'll get candidates who are well-meaning and say, well, couldn't hurt to try, and they apply. You're going to get many hundreds of applicants when you post a job. You need to have a way to quickly identify who you should look at in more depth. So my pre-screening questions were some complicated accounting-esque questions and some real basic stuff, like how many years have you used QuickBooks Online? Because this was a job for a business where the business owner knew her business but didn't know QuickBooks Online well enough to teach someone, she needed somebody who knew the software. After creating a list of pre-screening questions, I then created a list of sample technical questions. My role wasn't to ask the hard, weird interview questions that tell me about a time you had a difficult situation. None of that. My job was just to assess their ability to use QuickBooks. And so what I wanted to do is figure out what does the client need the person to do, make sure that those things are listed clearly, make sure that there's questions in the pre-screening questionnaire related to the things that the person needs to know how to do, and then create the ability for people to demonstrate that they do know how to do those things using QuickBooks Online. I reviewed all of the applicants that had applied for the job, reviewed their resumes, cover letters if they had them, the pre-screening questions. To keep it manageable, I declined the candidates that didn't have the right experience. Of the applicants that seemed like they might be a potential good fit, I reached out to them offering a technical interview and let them know exactly what was going to happen, that it was going to be me and not the business owner, that I was going to be providing a technical interview that lasts about 15 minutes, that I'd be recording it and sending the results to the business owner, and the business owner would then follow up with them as desired. hired. This is one of those situations where I'm incredibly thankful to have an Acuity account. I just set up a different calendar link separate from my training, separate from my bookkeeping, something that allowed people to book one of these hands-on interviews. Because I had a finite amount of time available to work on this, I put limits within Acuity to prevent my whole entire week from being monopolized by interviews. And so there was a certain amount of interviews that could be booked on a given day, and then a total amount that could be booked in a given week. I set up a Notion team space so that I could share my findings and my notes and my pre-screen interviews and all of this with the business owner. Because I had come up with the questions for the technical interview in advance, during the interview, I could have the same conversation over and over for consistency. I had a place that I could make notes about how the candidate did during these various questions. And then I assigned a points value to the answers. So if a candidate answered something completely wrong, they got 0 points. If they answered it partially to fully correct, they got a point. I think that it's too nitpicky to make a 3-point system where maybe partially correct is 1 point and fully correct is 2 points. What if somebody was like 75% correct? But I did want to differentiate between people who could and could not do the thing. I'll give you one example of one of the questions that I would ask, just so you can visualize this. I would ask people to create a new customer within QuickBooks Online. It's pretty straightforward. Either you can do it or you can't do it. And the people who couldn't, I put a 0 in that field for those points. The advantage of doing this with the point system was that I was then able to sort the candidates by total points from most to least and send all of it over to the business owner and say, here are my top candidates. Here's how they did on the assessment. Here's their total points. Here's their points compared to other people. Here's a link to their videos. But here's an at a glance. The next session in my internal Notion notes is that I wrote down the benefit to the client. I feel like it's important to think about what is the benefit to the client, or why would someone pay you to do this thing? Because if no one's going to pay you, then maybe it's just a hobby, and that's fine. I love my hobbies. Nobody pays me to assemble jigsaw puzzles, but I still do it. So I came up with 5 benefits. The first is I was able to review and modify the Indeed ad to speak to the specific skills needed for the bookkeeping aspect of the role. I didn't worry about changing anything else. I just focused on, I want to make sure the job description and the skills required for the one thing that I'm really, really good at is very clear so that a prospective employee doesn't get blindsided, so that they can look at the Indeed ad and they can look at their to-do list and say, yes, this all aligns. The second benefit to the client is I was pre-screening the candidates before the technical interview, so that way the client didn't have to pay for extra technical interviews. They're really only paying for them for candidates that had a sporting chance of being good fits. The third, of course, is providing the technical interview. Oftentimes a business owner, whether small or large, they're really good at the business. They're really good at the thing they went into business to do, present, provide, coach people on, whatever it is. They're not necessarily great at the accounting or bookkeeping side of things. So what I could do is I could come in and I could say, this person understands how to do bookkeeping, accounting, use QuickBooks. You should talk to them and see if they'd be a good fit for the rest of the role. This is no different than if I were to hire, and I have a great graphic designer, but let's pretend that I didn't. If I wanted to hire a graphic designer, I would have no idea if a graphic designer was good or not. The best I could do is look at their work and say, do I like it? Well, with bookkeeping, it's harder. What would a person look at, and how would you evaluate if the potential bookkeeper is good, and especially before hiring them? So again, the benefit was just having me take a look and say, yep, this person knows their stuff, because anybody can say anything on a resume. The fourth benefit was that I would consolidate the information about the candidates to one viewable dashboard. I wasn't asking the client to click into multiple different things. I just said, here's your dashboard. From here, you can click into and read detailed notes and watch the video. But here's an at a glance that you can take a look at 5 minutes a day and to see where we're at on this project. The last benefit is that I was able to immediately alert the client when I had a really good candidate. Somebody that I said, you know what, after my years of training people and the hundreds of people I've talked to, here's a person who knows their stuff, who on the things that they didn't know, I felt like they took feedback well, because not everybody does, and people who I felt were coachable. So I really didn't want any amazing candidates to slip through the cracks because the business owner was busy and didn't go look at the dashboard. So I just proactively would email them and say, hey, I'd love it if you go look at this one summary just when you get a chance. I think this is a person you might want to talk to. This particular project took me about 11 hours over the course of 3 weeks. I did 10 interviews with different people. I pre-screened hundreds of resumes. I made a list of things that I would do better next time. Again, I don't know if there'll be a next time, but probably, since I seem to do this on a once-a-year basis or so. I would like to have a better understanding of what the client does in QuickBooks so that I can really speak to what the candidate needs to do in QuickBooks. In this situation, I had a very high-level understanding. We talked about things like enter bills, but we didn't talk about what information, like, are you attaching the bill? Do you need to have client coding? Is there something special that has to go in the memo? Like, I feel like next time I'd like to have a very good understanding of what needs to happen in QuickBooks. There's a part of me that wants to be protective of candidates. And so I would like to know what the new hire needs to do to be successful on day one. We've all started a new job at some point. We've all had the first day where you're kind of looking around wondering, am I a good fit? Do they like me? Am I going to be able to do this job? So I think I would like to better understand how to set up that candidate for success. So if they do get hired on their first day, how are they going to knock someone's socks off? I'm not sure how to do this, but the third thing I have on my list is that I want to do more robust pre-screening. I felt like I offered technical interviews to a lot of people. The only reason it was limited to 10 is because we had limits on the number of interviews that I would offer in a given time. I definitely offered more people technical interviews than the people who scheduled. My calendar just isn't a first come, first serve basis. One of the problems I had, though, is that I had these pre-screening questions, but people would use AI to come up with answers to the questions. Or they would Google it, or they'd ask their friends, or who knows what. But it was real evident when I get them on a technical interview and say, hey, can you create a customer in QuickBooks? And they'd say, I don't know how to create a customer. I'm like, well, okay, that's a problem. So I need to find a way to do a better job at pre-screening. And like I said, I don't know what that is right now. And then I think I'd like to do a more tailored technical screening with weighted points based on what's most important to the client. So when I did this, I assigned everything the same point schedule, either 0 points if you got it wrong or 1 point if you got it right, either partially or totally. I think a better way to do it would be to identify the things that the client needs the bookkeeper to do, and then figure out what are the most important things and what are the bonus things. So the most important things, maybe it's like 3 points if you get the answer and, 2 points if you partially get the answer, or who knows what. It's been about 3 months since I did this pre-screening. And so I've had enough time away from it to no longer feel emotionally invested in the process, but it's recent enough to remember the experience and what it felt like. I really like the feeling of being able to help someone in an area that I'm good at that maybe they're less good at. This example, I've said it before and I'll say it again, was a business owner who's really good at her business and her industry, but she's not really great at QuickBooks and she's not really great at bookkeeping. The benefit of hiring me to do this was that I'm really great at bookkeeping and QuickBooks and being able to tell if somebody knows how to use the software. I was able to take people who had amazing resumes and filter out the ones who didn't really know how to use QuickBooks. I was able to take people who had less than spectacular resumes and bring them to the forefront and just say, you know what, I think this person may have had a hard time figuring out how to format the resume, but they know how to use QuickBooks and they should be considered. The thing that I could do is save this person the frustration of hiring a very nice person who didn't know how to use QuickBooks, but who did know how to bluff their way through it. I think there could be value in offering this as a service, but I don't know if I want to or how I'd want to go about it. The reason that I'm describing this experience is because maybe you are looking to hire a bookkeeper. Maybe you have a business that is bookkeeping. I just wanted to kind of talk about what I went through and how much time it took and kind of the ways in which that I tried to filter through the resumes, the things that I felt like I did well and the things that I would do differently in the future. My heart goes out to people who are looking for jobs. It's a lot of work to put your time and effort into applying for jobs and hoping for the best and then not hearing back. It's a lot of work on the other side. Like I said, for this particular job, I think I ran through 200 or 300 different resumes, and I was only working on this for about 3 weeks. And really, the reviewing the resume portion was probably 2 weeks of it, because at a certain point, I had to stop looking at resumes and just work through the technical interviews I had scheduled and see, was there anybody good in that lot? And if so, let the business owner decide, because you can't interview indefinitely. At a certain point, you have to stop and say, out of my pool of candidates, do I have anyone that I want to take a chance on? I was very fortunate that when I had Megan and I knew I had to lay her off, that I was able to put together a YouTube video and a PDF and just really explain what made her awesome. I feel very, very lucky that I have enough of a reach that I was able to get the word out. And through a friend, she was able to get a different job elsewhere. And so she never had to experience being one of the 200 or one of the 300. I hope if you're ever in my position where you need to lay someone off, that you reach out to your colleagues and friends and just say, hey, I've got this person. They're amazing. Here are their strengths. Do you need anybody or do you know anybody who needs somebody? So that that person doesn't have to go through this. If you find yourself in a position that you do need to hire a bookkeeper and you're not really sure how to pre-screen and find a good bookkeeper, talk to me. I'm happy to see if I can help you. It's not a service that I'm intending to market, but I'm clearly not opposed to doing it because I keep doing it for people. I'm going to put this podcast up on YouTube. There's no accompanying video, so it'll just be a sound file. But if you want to have a discussion and you don't want to email me and you don't want to hire me for a one-on-one, feel free to comment on the YouTube video. I'm happy to brainstorm ideas. Really, if I can help, I'm all for it. If you can help me or anybody else who's in a similar situation, I would love to hear from you. So, thanks.